Hello, everyone. Welcome to my author presentation on Samuel Beckett. We will be talking a bit about the author's life in general before diving into his life work within his plays and even looking at some of that work play out on stage. I also wanted to add that I'm recording this presentation with live subtitles to make it better accessible for others, though this is my first time in doing so for a class presentation. So apologies for any hiccups on that end. Um, I'm also using Zoom to record this, so bear with me. Before we begin, I want to quote one of Beckett's many famous lines from his 1952 play of Waiting for Godot. We are all born mad, some remain so. Then on the right here, we have a really nice picture of the author himself. So I wanted us to get to know the author before we take a dip into his work. The man before reaching fame. Samuel Barclay Beckett was born on April 13th, 1906 in Foxrock, Dublin, Ireland, to his father William Frank Beckett, who worked in construction business, and his mother Maria Jones Rowe, who was a nurse. The young Beckett attended Earlsfort House School in Dublin. Then, at the age of 14, he attended Portora Royal School, which, fun fact, another notable figure of writing also attended the same school before he was born. That writer was Oscar Wilde. Beckett then went off to Trinity College and received his bachelor's degree in 1927. One interesting fact that I ran across was that in an interview, Beckett disclosed that, quote, I had little talent for happiness, quote. In his childhood, he had stated that he would quite often experience severe depression that would keep him in bed until midday, which is an experience that would influence his future work. Once Beckett finished college, he went off and traveled down to Paris, in which he met and became the student of James Joyce, who was also from where Beckett was from. James Joyce was an Irish modernist writer who was known for the explicit content of his prose that ended up bringing landmark legal decisions on obscenity. In 1931, he went on a journey through Britain, France, and Germany in which he wrote poems and stories, including doing some odd jobs in order to financially support himself at that time. Within his journey, he came across many people that would end up inspiring the characters within his future work. Coming back to Paris in 1937, he ended up settling in, but shortly was stabbed by a pimp after he refused his solicitations. Though while he was recovering in the hospital, he there met his future wife, Suzanne, who was a piano student in Paris. Though after meeting with his attacker after he was taken out of the hospital, Beckett dropped the charges as he wanted to avoid any publicity. During World War II, Beckett was allowed to remain in Paris due to being a citizen of a neutral country. He ended up fighting in the resistance movement until 1942, when many members of his group were arrested by the Gestapo. Him, his wife, and himself fled on foot by walking at night and sleeping during the day to an unoccupied zone until the end of the war. Beckett, who was easily anxious, suffered from periodic mental breakdowns. The trauma of his friend's arrest, his escape from Paris, and the life he left behind made a huge impact. On top of that, his guilt being away from his mother took a toll on his mental health. He passed his time by playing chess, going on rather long walks, and working at a neighbor's farmer's field in return for food during this time. Beckett at this time was also actively working on a novel titled What, in which he had begun a year before he had fled from Paris, which he stated that it provided a way for him to stay sane in the middle of the war. In the late summer of 1944, Beckett once again joined the leader of the resistance and the town that he was living in on a planned ambush of retreating German vehicles along the Route Nationale. But luckily or unluckily, the Germans never ended up showing up. By the end of the year, his wife and himself were able to return to their apartment back in Paris, in which he had just completed a draft of What. His book was rejected by many London publishers until 1953, after his success with Waiting for Godot, that the Olympia Press published an edition which was riddled with typos. After the war, Beckett was awarded a Heroism Award for his bravery during his time in the French Resistance. Once settled in Paris, in 5 years he wrote Eleutheria, Waiting for Godot, and Endgame. He also wrote novels such as Malloy, Malone Dies, The Unnameable, and Mercier et Camille, two books of short stories and a book of criticism. Malloy was his first publication, which did well in book sales and brought him praise from critics around France, though his real hit was Waiting for Godot, that really thrusted him very quickly into the international spotlight, as the play had ran for at least 400 performances and was raved by the critics. Beckett wrote both in English and in French, but most of his notable pieces were written in French. Beckett noted that his writing had to be subjective and rather only come from his own thoughts and experiences versus others. Beckett's writing does allude to other notable writers such as Rene Descartes, Joyce, and Dante. Beckett's style of writing focuses more on the essential elements of human condition in dark humor versus the traditional lines of plot, time, and place, which are the things that we usually expect when we go to see a play or a musical in theater. He really focused on expressing his writing in the absurdity and just the estrangement of modern life. With Beckett's rise of fame, the 1960s looked a little different from him, as he received many invitations to attend performances and rehearsals, in which led the starting of his career as a theater director. In 1961, Beckett secretly married his wife Suzanne, who actually ended up taking care of the business side of his career so that he could focus on the writing side. Beckett, at his career at an all-time high, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969, but surprisingly or not surprisingly enough, he declined in accepting it personally in order to avoid making a speech at the ceremony. He continued to write through the 1970s and 80s in a small house just right outside of Paris so he could dedicate his time to his writing and just avoid the spotlight of his fame. The picture that is on the right is on one of the films that he was working on. Can't remember off the top of my head, but the photographer who ended up taking these pictures took a lot of note on how Beckett wasn't, as we learned that he's not one for the spotlight, didn't really like taking pictures. A lot of his pictures aren't him directly looking at a camera, as most people take like portraits. A lot of it is just that at one point he just let people take pictures of him, but just to leave him alone and like let him be in his business. And like in this picture, the photographer described how Beckett was just sitting in this like room on this set, just like observing like the nature of the cat and the dog and the basket and their behaviors. So I thought that was really interesting to share. So, towards the end of Samuel Beckett's life, he was starting to fail in health, especially towards the late 1980s, in which prompted him to move to a nursing home. His wife, Suzanne, passed away in the summer of 1989, right before he did. Samuel Beckett would live the rest of his time in a small room at a nursing home where he could receive visitors and continue his writing, though in the winter of 1989, so just a couple of months after his wife passed away, he also ended up passing away with respiratory problems. As I stated earlier, one thing that I did find interesting about Samuel Beckett was an article by the New Yorker that talked about Beckett wasn't one for taking pictures. I also did some research on trying to find a picture of him and his wife together, and I was not successful in finding one, or at least being able to identify myself a picture of them together, as legendary notes of there's not a lot of pictures of Samuel Beckett himself throughout his life. Um, he, like I said, he wasn't one for the spotlight. He wasn't one for wanting to be pictures. He really just did not want to be like him himself in the public eye, as a lot of celebrities are with just, having interviews and just expressing themselves. He just kind of put his work out there and he wanted that to express him. Um, he did dodge a lot of photographers, as especially when he won his Nobel Prize. But for the ones that he was able to, or at least the photographers that were able to convince him to get a picture, or two or five, um, he then let them. I will link those articles from the New Yorker and other articles. I think it was just one or two. But it's really interesting because when I was looking for like visual images, there's a lot of repetitions of the same ones. And then running into this article was like that it kind of explained a lot of his behavior in terms of not wanting to be photographed. Moving on to his style of writing, it is to no one's surprise that his style fits right into a style called theater of the observed, which we've talked about in this course. And if you've taken any of the theater of history courses here at Millersville, then this is not something new to you. This genre of theater was new and was inspired after the aftermath of World War II, as the world appeared to be chaotic and meaningless to many people, as the war had left more than 60 million casualties, including 6 million Jews, and many others who were killed in the Holocaust. For the playwrights who took on this genre, when they meant by absurd, they meant out of harmony rather than describing it as ridiculous. This style of theater caused for many theater audiences to become startled as it broke away from all traditional stage techniques, raised lots of questions, and didn't really leave many answers, if any, and expressed the inability to make sense of life itself. Beckett's famous piece, Waiting for Godot, has a number of significant characteristics from the theater of the absurd. With the theater of the absurd, as was stated before, does not follow the traditional ways that audiences are used to. With theater of the absurd, instead of having a problem that is solved, really it resolves nothing. This is seen at the very end of the play where Godot never arrives. Instead of having a plot that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, pieces in this genre really do not have any plot, as we see that Act 2 in Waiting for Godot repeats the same pattern as Act 1. Instead of having dialogue that expresses the meaning of the play, this genre reveals meaning both from words and deeds that sometimes just straight up conflict with each other, as we see that Vladimir and Estragon, I'm sorry, agreed to leave, but actually don't end up moving to do so. Instead of having specific elements in a play such as comedy or tragedy, the absurd blends these elements of unlikely comedy with rather painful situations, as we see Estragon lose his trousers. Meanwhile, with Vladimir, he's trying to figure out how they both can hang themselves. For the last one, the theater of the absurd features less distinctive characters, as Estragon and Vladimir dress alike, both are male, and have similar backgrounds. I would definitely recommend watching and reading Waiting for Godot, as and then finding these like kind of things as you watch the show and read the play. There's it's interesting. That's to say the least. So while doing some browsing across the internet, I did find that there is a movie film of Waiting for Godot among full-length videos of the play itself, but not much clips of scenes themselves or any monologuing possibly. With the best quality and rather notable actors that you may recognize, here are some snippets of the famous play. Um, yeah, so here we go.
Say, I am happy. I am happy. So am I. So am I. We are happy. We are happy. What do we do now that we're happy? You should have been a poet.
Oh, I was, isn't that obvious? Que voulez-vous?
I beg your pardon?
Que voulez-vous?
Ah,
Que voulez-vous?
exactly. How does it fit me?
How would I know?
Well, that passed the time.
It would have passed in any case.
Right?
Say,
So while I was searching around for pieces of this play, I actually came around and found the spoof of this of Waiting for Godot created by Sesame Street for a series called Monsterpiece. This series ran for 37 episodes on PBS, and the host of the show was Alistair Cookie, or aka our favorite, the Cookie Monster, who introduces the audience to a modern masterpiece that is just so modern and so brilliant that it just makes absolutely no sense to anybody. So this is just a little bonus to the video in the previous slide, and just wanted to end the presentation on a fun note.
Oh, hello there. Yes, Alistair Cookie, welcoming you to Monsterpiece Theater. Today, me proud to present a modern masterpiece. A play so modern and so brilliant, it makes absolutely no sense to anybody, including Alistair. Okay, maybe you can figure it out. The puzzling story of two monsters waiting for their friend. A play called Waiting for Elmo. I wonder where our little friend Elmo is.
He said to wait by this tree and he would come out and play with us, but he's not here. He's not here!
But think about it. When Elmo finally shows up and plays with us, we will be so happy. Ha! 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 Ah, we will have so much fun.
But what if we wait here all day and he never shows up?
Oh, that would make us angry. How dare he keeps us by this tree, waiting, waiting, waiting. Oh, let us give another look. Maybe he is coming.
He's still not here. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Well, maybe I should go and you wait for Elmo.
But then I'd be all alone, and that would make me sad. Oh, so sad.
Yes, that would be sad, waiting for Elmo alone by a tree. Alone in the world. Waiting, waiting, waiting.
Okay, that does it. I've been standing out here waiting for this play to make some sense. I don't get it. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I'm out of here. Why couldn't they do Oklahoma? I understand Oklahoma. Oh,
The tree is leaving, and Elmo said to wait by the tree. We will have to hold the tree. Wait, tree, wait. Yeah, that deep, deep stuff. Oh well, now for something that makes a lot more sense. Ah, cookie! Nom, 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 Oh yeah, 4 stars.
So here are my references. I hope that this author presentation on Samuel Beckett has been insightful in learning more about the author's life, his style of writing, his works, and how his works are still being acted and portrayed through different styles of media. I also hope the last video was something, just to laugh at a little bit, or potentially maybe even show your kids or your cousins or nieces and nephews, whatever you may have, or just friends just to catch a little laugh. Um, I will link the videos at least with the discussion post. If you're interested in the other references, you can comment and let me know. Thank you, everyone.